We're looking at an all-out mythical creature brawl here, and you'll notice that an elephant and dragon are in the mix, but not fighting each other. That might seem a little odd given the point of the video, but what I want to highlight here is that the elephant was a mythical creature. Mythical and yet real, because in ancient times people believed that what we now think of as mythical creatures existed, right? Like here, the Catoblepas, my favorite. They believed these roamed around in Africa. And you had to be careful because they could kill you with their breath or sight, depending on the version of the story. Sea monsters, the list is never ending. But we forget that the elephant was in the mix, so the elephant was often portrayed with griffins and manticores and things like that. And that sets the stage for the ancient, forgotten rivalry, elephant versus dragon. These mortal enemies, whose never-ending war was well known to the educated once upon a time. Also, as part of laying the foundation, we should mention that dragons are just a great foil, right? You want your heroic character going up against a dragon, like St. George here, or Siegfried in the next illustration. Now, granted, elephant versus dragon wasn't a classic good versus evil tale. It was supposed to be something that was actually happening in the natural world, but there was that aspect to it, as we'll see. Now let's take a look at each animal in turn. Here is a medieval conception of an elephant. I love these. Gonna do a whole separate video on this, but a fort, almost a mini castle on its back. Elephants were renowned for their strength. People understood they're very large, they're very strong, but they might not have had the most realistic idea about them. Yeah, they're getting it mostly right here. The average illustration was going to be made by someone who had never even seen one themselves. You better believe that's the case here. I could not resist including this, so some kind of elephant sea monster. And that just reinforces its mythic aspects. Now on to the dragon. Dragons were a source of fascination as well, probably more so. Their depictions run the gamut much more so than with elephants even, and that makes sense since nobody saw a dragon. Sure, very few people saw an elephant in the Western world, but ever since the time of Alexander the Great, there were some actual specimens in Greece and Rome and places like that. Back to dragons, they were of course described often as a serpent-like, serpentine. And these here, the kind that writers from the classical era to medieval times said tilted with elephants. So no, don't imagine something like this, whatever exactly this is, going up against an elephant in their minds. Again, it was a phenomena from the natural world, and they pictured dragons and elephants as more animal-like. Couldn't resist this. Here's a dragon giving a saint a ride. And now let's get to the actual matchup, though. There's a lot of ancient art depicting it. And we're going to scroll through some of it while I read you some quotations. This is from a 13th century Franciscan monk. Between elephants and dragons is everlasting fighting, for the dragon with his tail binds and spans the elephant, and the elephant with his foot and with his nose throws down the dragon, and the dragon binds and spans the elephant's legs, and makes him fall. But the dragon takes it full sore, for while he slays the elephant falls upon him and slays him too. That's what all the old sources seem to agree upon. Then they differ in a lot of details, but we'll continue with this source here. Bartholomeus Anglicus, by the way, was his name. Also, the elephant, seeing the dragon upon a tree, goes to him to break the tree, to smite the dragon, and the dragon leaps upon the elephant, to bite him between the nostrils, and attacks the elephant's eyes, and sometimes blind him, and sometimes leaps upon him from behind, and bites him and sucks his blood. And at last, after long fighting, the elephant becomes feeble for great blindness, insomuch that he falls upon the dragon, and slays in his dying the dragon that killed him. Here's a different take on all this. The dragon is the enemy of the elephant, and hides near paths where elephants walk, so that it can catch them with its tail and kill them by suffocation. When it is time to give birth, the female wades into a pool up to her belly and gives birth there. If she gave birth on land, the elephant's enemy, the dragon, would devour the baby. To make sure the dragon cannot attack, the male elephant stands guard and tramples the dragon if it approaches the pool. You'll notice that this illustration and the last touch on precisely this parental protection versus predator dynamic. Here, as you can tell, we have the male-female pair protecting the calf, so a very different explanation, well, actually un-explanation, right? Unlike the first time where I guess the dragon is just trying to eat an adult elephant, which I guess often led to mutual death. Notice here, even this third image, just like the last two, has the water at the bottom. And now if you see that kind of thing in the future, you'll be one of the very few people who knows what's going on. Let's read from Pliny the Elder, an august classical world source, right? Africa produces elephants, but it is India that produces the largest, as well as the dragon, which is perpetually at war with the elephant, and is itself of so enormous a size as easily to envelop the elephants with its folds and encircle them in its coils. The contest is equally fatal to both. The elephant, vanquished, falls to earth, and by its weight crushes the dragon, which is entwined around it. The dragon has much difficulty in climbing up to so great a height, and therefore, watching the road, which bears marks of their footsteps when going to feed, it darts down upon them from a lofty tree. The elephant knows that it is quite unable to struggle against the folds of the serpent, and so seeks for trees or rocks against which to rub itself. The dragon is on guard against this, and tries to prevent it, by first of all confining the legs of the elephant with the folds of its tail, while the elephant, on the other hand, endeavors to disengage itself with its trunk. The dragon, however, thrusts its head into its nostrils, and thus, at the same moment, stops the breath and wounds the most tender parts. When it is met unexpectedly, the dragon raises itself up, faces its opponent, and flies more especially at the eyes. This is the reason why elephants are so often found blind, and worn to a skeleton with hunger and misery. What other cause can one assign for such mighty strifes as these, except that nature is desirous, as it were, to make an exhibition for herself, in pitting such opponents against each other? Real quick, Pliny also touches on the vampiric note that you might have remembered from earlier in the video. There is another story, too, told in relation to these combats. The blood of the elephant, it is said, is remarkably cold, for which reason, in the parching heat of summer, it is sought by the dragon with remarkable avidity. It lies, therefore, coiled up and concealed in the rivers, in wait for the elephants, when they come to drink, upon which it darts out, fastens itself around the trunk, and then fixes its teeth behind the ear, that being the only place which the elephant cannot protect with the trunk. The dragons, it is said, are of such vast size that they can swallow the whole of the blood. Consequently, the elephant, being thus drained of its blood, falls to the earth exhausted, while the dragon, intoxicated with the draught, is crushed beneath it, and so shares its fate. So that's a very different reason for the constant fighting than the calf hunting. Here's a little bit more on that one. This is from Isidore of Seville, 7th century. They give birth, after a gestation period of 2 years, to a single child at a time. They give birth in secret, and send their young to water or islands to protect them from their enemy the dragon, which kills elephants by binding them. And what the heck, I can't help one more back to the blood drinking. This is from the Westminster Bestiary, circa 1285. The dragon drinks the blood of the elephant for the purpose of cooling his burning intestines. Ouch, I feel sorry for all parties involved there. Now back to something I mentioned early in the video, the aspect of good versus evil, at least to a certain extent. What that was about was, here we are, at the Garden of Eden. Within the, medieval Christian mindset, all serpents harken back to the serpent, this serpent, right? The devil himself. And dragons are serpentine creatures. Meanwhile, elephants are just considered naturally good. So this is from the Aberdeen Bestiary, circa 1200. They never fight over female elephants, for they know nothing of adultery. They possess the quality of mercy. If by chance they see a man wandering in the desert, they offer to lead him to familiar paths. Or, if they encounter herds of cattle huddled together, they make their way carefully and peaceably, lest their tusks kill any animal in their way. If by chance they fight in battle, they have no mean intent to the wounded, for they take the exhausted and the injured back into their midst. So they are really nice, and just very Christian in all things, right? Now let me quote from a medieval French poem. Near her time she has great fear of the dragon which watches them. In very deep water she goes, to give birth, that the dragon may not seize her calf. For should he see it out of the water, the dragon would devour it. In these two beasts truly are Eve and Adam figured, when they were in paradise. Set in plenty and in joy, they did not know what evil was. Well, I'll say it again, who knew? This page that you're seeing here, by the way, is from a long paper on the elephant in medieval legend and art. That's the title, from the Journal of the Royal Archaeological Institute, Volume 76, London, 1919. And the author, George C. Druce, shows a lot of other original sources talking about that aspect of the elephants. So they're very pious, right? They're even described over and over in ancient sources as being chaste. So they're pious, they're chaste, they're even virginal. They're like Eve, or like Adam and Eve before the fall. And they're explicitly compared to Adam and Eve in this quote-unquote legend of the elephant. Looking at some of the old poems, they even go back to paradise. That's right, the legend says that elephants go back to the garden, go back to paradise to mate, and they recreate Adam and Eve's sin in remembrance, sharing fruit from a tree, and of course the female feeds it to the male. Just the same do these beasts in this world, who remember the deed of the ancient crime which Eve and Adam did. I'm quoting from this poem here. So yeah, the rivalry goes all the way back to the events of Genesis, back to creation. And here's my original thought to add to all this. If the elephants are kind of stand-ins for Adam and Eve, then the elephant calf that we've seen targeted by the dragon so often is humanity, right? The offspring of Adam and Eve being targeted by the devil. Man, I went so much deeper on this video than I had originally planned. Just kept learning more. So that's the whole story behind the mysterious ancient enmity between these two creatures. Thank you.